Congratulations, Mike.
Thank you.
And so we have a lot to talk about today, so we'll just jump right in, and as folks join, just run through a quick round of introductions, especially since this is the first meeting of our 2021 cycle and there are some new faces. So just jump in and introduce, just name and affiliation, and feel free to throw it in the chat otherwise. I'll kick it off. Dustin Loop, co-chair, IGF-USA.
Hi folks, Melinda Clem. I'm also co-chair of IGF-USA. I'm going to take another 20 seconds here to let you know that my information has changed. Dustin's already updated the email list. I'm currently on a uncharted sabbatical. As many of you know, Affilius was acquired by Aubrey Partners. The company was split up into two companies, and then some people chose not to go with any of them. So I'm currently hanging out, deciding what I want to do, having conversations about work, but not in any rush. So my focus right now is going to be IGF-USA for the next few months and learning how to paint with watercolors. So if you need to reach me, melinda@clem.us. My phone number is the same. Good to see you all.
And I'm Mike Nelson. I'm a long-term Internet Society and IGF groupie.
Hi, I'm Judith Hellerstein. I've also been a very long-term IGF-USA person. Been active a lot last few years, and originally I got Madeline Cade is the one who got me active in the IGF-USA many years ago. So I am looking forward to another year of planning for the IGF-USA.
Hi, I'm George Sadowski. I'm on the ISOC board, and I have been going stir crazy with cabin fever and confinement in Bethesda for almost a year now.
Hi, I'm Courtney Raj. I'm the advocacy director at the Committee to Protect Journalists, and have been pretty active in the IGF-USA for several years. And I've been on calls all day, so I'm gonna go off video, but it's great to see everyone.
Hi, I'm Bob Hershey. I'm an independent engineering and management consultant.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, I'm an independent engineering and management consultant.
I'm James Galvin. I like Mike's designation of IGF-USA groupie. I'm going to borrow that if he doesn't mind. Always been here in the background for a little while. And to follow on from Melinda's comment, yeah, you know, Affiliates, part of Donuts. I actually have migrated to being part of Donuts at the moment, for those who track such things in this business. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Higgins, and I'm a project and policy advisor at the Internet Society, and this will be my 4th year doing IGF-USA.
Hi, everyone. I'll go. I'm Naila Saras. I am, as of November last year, I am the VP for North America Global Stakeholder Engagement Team. Before that, I've worked with many of you in several capacities at ICANN. Most recently in the IANA function. I am here to observe today. This is my first IGF-USA organizing call, and I'm certainly familiar with the IGF-USA, so I'm mostly observing today. Thank you, and it's good to see everyone.
So this is John Moore with the DC chapter of the Internet Society, and I've been worked on the money side of the secretariat part of IGF, but have really enjoyed and gone to international IGF meetings and stuff, and I hope we get back to that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chanel Adikono, and similar to the previous woman who was speaking, I am also new to this, and I was forwarded this event by my manager, admittedly. I'm with the USAID Digital Development and Innovation Department. We just reorganized, so that's why I can't think of my own name of at the office at USAID with the informatics team and doing a lot of work on gender data, closing the gender digital divide, and data governance. Thank you.
I'm Annette Suriani, and I am the event planner, and this is going to be my 4th year working with IGF-USA. The first 2 years were face-to-face, and then we pivoted to virtual last year. So we'll see what happens this year.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Noyes. I am the lead for the FBI's 5G and Internet governance programs. We are now starting our 2nd year as part of IGF-USA, so we're very proud to be members, and thanks for allowing us to join.
My name's Kibi. I feel very strongly about some deficient content, let's call it, on the internet, some things that are slowing us down as a human race. And I'm very curious as to what our effects can be, positive effects can be on the development of the internet and protecting the First Amendment. You see a lot of people approaching this with a don't censor us and we can put whatever we want on the internet, but that's actually destroying our free speech concept. So it would be, I'm very curious as to how this group and other groups can work together during this time where the internet reform is center stage.
So maybe I'll go next. I'm Fiona Alexander at American University these days and do some consulting, but have been involved with IGF USA and the broader IGF since their inception during my 20 years of life before at NTIA. So happy to be kicking off the new year.
All right, well, I'm going to treat the introductions kind of like popcorn in the microwave. When it starts to slow down, you kind of cut it off. Anybody else, please feel free to jump in or throw your introduction in the chat. But thank you all. It's great to see you all again, and or for the first time for those of you that are new. And for those of you that are new, we did have a kind of introductory webinar last week, and we're going to kind of jump in running here, but if you want more information on that, happy to send the recording around if you feel like you need a little bit more information to jump into the process. So feel free to reach out to Melinda and I for that. So with today's agenda, and I'll throw it in the chat again because it might have gotten lost in all of the introductions. We're gonna go over the format and timing of our conference this year, then go over some of the timelines and milestones for the planning, go over the process for how we'll select topics, discuss potential pre-events and interim events, and then shift the focus to what's happening at the global IGF, and then at the end, just a brief update on where we're at as an organization financially, and kind of move on to any other business from there if we have time. So looking forward to kicking this off. And I guess before we get started, we've been having these conversations for a long time on a lot of these topics, and they've become, increasingly of interest in the broader dialogue happening out there. And this has always been a space where we can facilitate dialogue and advance that discussion in the right direction for the betterment of the internet and the people that it serves. And so by virtue of being here, assume that even where we have disagreements, that we all want what's best for the internet and the people it serves, even if we have different opinions on how to get there. And so just want to encourage us all to keep the civil nature of dialogue that has that we've experienced at the IGF-USA, and hope to continue that, and you know, keep being champions for the internet. So thank you all for joining, and just wanted to kind of kick off that way. So without further ado, let's jump into the agenda. We don't know when the IGF-USA will be this year, or what format it will be. That's unusual for us. Usually we work to set a date and have a venue booked going into the planning cycle, so that we know how that planning cycle should be structured and what format we should be aiming for as we plan. And so wanted to open this up with a little bit of discussion about where you all think we should be focused, and how we should be approaching our planning this year. There's last year we held a virtual event that I think was very well received, and by all accounts a successful event, especially given that we pivoted halfway through the process. So as we look toward this year, how would you all like us to approach making decisions around whether or not we're in person or virtual this year, and how that affects the timing of it? I think if we, just in discussions with Melinda, I think if we do go in person, it might make sense to push back from our normal kind of date range, which would be in late July. And then if we go virtual, maybe it makes sense to stick with the same timing. That seems to have been a successful date range, but we'll open the floor. Melinda, if you want to add anything, go ahead. And then any ideas on how we should be thinking about our approach are very welcome.
Yeah, so like Justin said, we want to have an open discussion, but to give a little more structure and to not, really abuse people's time here. None of us here, from what I can see, work for the CDC or who are infectious disease experts. So, our assumption here is that people are putting together guidelines. Those guidelines will be produced and public in a few weeks that define what are the metrics, whether, it's an R naught, it's a vaccination rate, a combination of the two, that will start easing restrictions that we have to date on in-person gatherings. We know that will come. We're not going to solve for that today. We're really just looking to, and that could have a big impact on what we're doing. But with the information we have, later in the year for an in-person event would be the most prudent, but still not guaranteed, right? As Dustin mentioned. So what we would like is just your general thoughts, with the uncertainty. Should we just go virtual? Do we want to wait and play our hand? If we go virtual, what's the timing? Do we want to stay late July? Do we want to move it forward in the year and get out here, a little, maybe a month or two earlier than we normally would? So any thoughts on those things without trying to be epidemiologists is what we're looking for.
What is your attendance level typically? Or what's it been in the past?
So it was actually very good on when everything was online. Not surprising. Nobody was doing anything else in July of this year, right?
So last year this time, what was your meeting number? Is it 100 number? Is it a 50 number?
At our conference, we usually have about 200 to 250 participants at the conference.
The only reason I say that is because I went to your Reston location, and I'm just curious if there's not possibly a meeting spot that's outdoors where you would have less restrictions, like say the mall or something like that, or the Lincoln Monument, where you can be, you can have a rather large group and still have a lot of open space. I don't know what you're,
Yeah,
without being,
That's an interesting outside of the box suggestion. Yeah.
that's me.
Just a quick clarification. I think you might be conflating the Internet Society and the Internet Governance Forum USA, perhaps, when you mentioned the Reston location.
Right.
So, I mean, we're housed inside of the DC chapter as the
Okay.
Secretariat, but ultimately an independent initiative.
Okay.
And when we refer to whether or not we'll have it in person, it's specifically for the conference itself.
Understood.
In past years, it's been, the last few years, it's been at CSIS in South DuPont in DC.
My sense is that we're not going to be able to make a decision on this or even think about it well today. We've got new variants coming out. We have issues about whether the virus can handle them well or not, et cetera. And I don't think we need to make this decision for the next couple of months. And I suspect we'd probably make it wrong if we tried to start today.
Yeah, the intention's definitely not to make a decision here. I think we probably want to focus on a decision around the time that we select the topics so that the planning can be informed by the format. So that would be sometime like late March, early April. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And I also want to go to, I don't know whose hand went up first, but Mike and Courtney.
Courtney, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that, for a long time, we've talked about how we could make the IGF USA less DC centric. And I know that also this year I'm on the multi-stakeholder advisory group for the IGF, and we're having a working group on more like making remote participation more meaningful. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to really think about how we operationalize that. I think especially in a year when potentially so many more people really are going to understand what internet governance means, and that planning for, at the very least, a hybrid event, if we're lucky, there could be in-person element, but I think we should aim to have a primarily virtual event that could include hubs and engagement in a way that a physical event is just really challenging to do. And it gives us another year to really focus on that outreach and inclusion so that it is the Internet Governance USA and not just Washington, DC.
If I can add on to that, I'm going to really strongly agree with Courtney, and I'm so glad that she's on the MAG. I know how much work that is, and I know how influential this group, the IGF USA, can be in helping show the global IGF some new tricks. And I think we could decide today what we want to do, and I think we could decide when we want to do it. Because as I look at the options here, we have in person, and as Courtney says, that's going to dramatically limit who can actually participate. It's going to be even worse than other years because people aren't going to want to fly to here. It may be that only people with vaccines or positive COVID tests can come to events. I mean, there's all sorts of things that are going to make it even worse and less representative to do it in person. One thing we know is that hybrid events are almost always the worst option. I mean, I've done a bunch of those, and you have people in the room who can sort of dominate the conversation, and they get all the advantages of being there. And no matter how well you do it, there's a second class of citizens who are on the line. And then we have the virtual. And we did a damn good job last year, but we didn't realize the full opportunity because we didn't know until pretty late that we were going to be virtual. If we decide today we're going to go virtual, we can reach out and get the very best people all around the country and sign them up. One of the things that bothers me about how the global IGF is planning right now is that they're pushing forward thinking they're going to do a hybrid event, and they're going to set up all these panels, and then quite likely they're going to have to go virtual. and they're going to miss the opportunity to get the best people because they're only going to sign up the people who are willing to go to Poland. We have the chance, and again, if we do it right, we can do this virtual. We might think about doing a 2-phase event. So we do virtual 2 days, and maybe we have a half day at the end where people could meet in person. And maybe that's where you can get some of the high level officials from Washington. Maybe that's where you do some kind of reporter friendly panel where we have a discussion about all the virtual events and what the highlights were. But trying to do a combined hybrid event with hundreds of, 100 people or 50 people in person and hundreds of people virtual, I mean, that really doesn't work. The other thing I'd urge us is to do it either when we normally do it, which would be great because we could do outdoor receptions if we did the second phase, or if we even, if everything was virtual, we still wanted to do a reception in person, we could still do that. But we might think about doing it a month or two earlier, because if we could show how a 2-phase event works, and we could show how a truly virtual event designed from the start to be virtual works, we could really set an example for the IGF. The other reason not to go later is that everybody's going to be delaying until September, October, November. And we just don't want to be part of that collision. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to be so adamant, but I think you make a decision as fast as you can, and I think we can make a decision.
With that format that you're proposing, would you not then be able to hold possibly more meetings per year in the future as well?
That's something we can discuss, but this has typically been an annual meeting.
Right.
Judith.
Yeah, the options we've talked about are, if you think of it as one large annual meeting and then significantly smaller, sort of single topic, under 2 hours kind of events, that's what we would be. We certainly have the capacity of doing those. Okay. Any other, broad stroke thoughts on this? Okay. Oh, Judith.
Yeah, he definitely called on me before. It's Judith Hellerstein. I see where you're coming from on the hybrid issue, but I think what we really miss is sort of the networking and the getting together. And if we could possibly do panels and then still have networking receptions outside, I think that might be good and be like sort of the best, or maybe having the wrap up outside and then go straight into the reception or something like that, or find some way that we can integrate people getting together and talking about the IGF and actually getting, like you said, the best people and getting a really good interactive panel. And then I had more thoughts on, how do we improve on what we had from virtual last year? But I think that's not in this topic right now, I don't think.
That is the proposal. The idea of a 2-phase would be like a day and a half or 2 days, totally virtual, and then maybe two or 3 hours of an in-person program where you might have panels. And you could do something where you highlight what's happened, you bring in some superstars in person, and then you'd have a reception for those people in the DC area. But that would be your press event. That would be your, Washington DC policymaker event. Because they like to, they at that point they might want to be on a panel. You might even get CNN coverage or C-SPAN coverage, which you would not get from a virtual event. But it would be 2 separate things. It would be virtual followed by in-person followed by reception.
Yeah, I like that. And then maybe we could also do a virtual pre-event of like, here's what's coming up at the IGF, the virtual IGF, to whet people's appetite to come.
Yeah. Well, Dustin did his traveling roadshow that 2 years ago that was very successful.
And we'll actually later in the agenda be talking about potential pre-events as well. But what I'm sensing from this discussion, we didn't necessarily allocate enough time here to come to a full consensus decision here. But it sounds like at the moment that there is, so far the vocal support has been for something that at a minimum prioritizes virtual. And so at our next meeting, we will definitely allocate more time to discuss this further, and we'll still be early enough in the process. I mean, right now it's just about collecting topics, and I don't know that those will change significantly whether we're virtual or in person. So throughout this process, let's keep these conversations going and then look at the next meeting to potentially make a decision and or discuss what this would look like in a little bit more detail. So.
Can I ask a homework assignment? Can anybody find a good example of a hybrid event that they went to, either in person or virtual, that they found satisfying? Because I haven't. So that would be my homework assignment for next time.
I'm actually in the process of planning one for May in Texas, and anything goes in Texas right now.
Well, good luck.
Okay.
So
Go ahead, Joe.
one thought I had is that one of the things I've seen about the virtual meetings is that you have a lot more opportunity to have more sessions on more topics. So that depending on what when we make the decision, that actually, in my mind, will have an effect on how we structure it. Because I've just seen, there's such differences depending on how that gets structured. And I think they've gotten better with the way of being able to make them manage. And then the other thing about it is that clear to me that the virtual would allow us to just get more folks from across the United States involved in this. It just does help the fact that they can come and be part of it. So that's just my thought.
And people outside the US.
Yeah, also.
We might even invite Canadians.
We always invite Canadians.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. This is the kind of discussion we wanted, just to really get a pulse of what people's thoughts are here early in the year. But I think we've got a good sense. If anyone thinks of anything after the meeting, just shoot us an email if there's something else you want to share.
Yeah, so thanks for all your thoughts on that. And this, as of now, is what I'm sharing is a timeline of the planning cycle here. And, this obviously may change. And so it's not super detailed like some of our timelines are in outlining the all of the meetings, but just some of the kind of milestones along the way instead. So the first step in our process is the call for topics, where people just suggest what we should be prioritizing for the year. That's currently open and will remain open until February 16th. So make your submissions and also please help us promote this. This call for topics open to anyone, and especially if we're going to be leaning into a virtual format and a virtual planning cycle, it would be great to get as many people contributing topics and into the organizing of the sessions as possible. Following the close of that call for topics, we will have a meeting to review the results. That will happen in the end of February. We'll take that discussion and the call for topics, and we will meld them into a manageable survey that will then go out to the community again to rank these topics. And depending on the number of topics we ultimately decide, we will select the top scoring topics within that the allocated number of sessions. And so that's a meeting when we select those topics that we always cite as a very important one to attend, and that'll happen in mid-March. Normally it'd be a week later, but ICANN having their meeting a little bit later threw that off. And then following that, there's a short period of time where we form teams and have an open sign up for anybody that wants to contribute to any of the topics that we collectively select for the conference. So, and then that team works together to plan that with an open consensus-based process. And then from April 5th, there are more milestones generally in here that would be outlined, but they just involve basically getting the descriptions in on time, getting the panelists locked down in a certain timeline, making sure that we have all of the information that we need to help promote it, manage registration, organize meetings with speakers, things like that. So we'll get more detail on that once we finalize the date and format itself, but that planning generally takes place starting in early April and would extend through July. So that's the timeline that we have for now, and that you can also find that timeline linked on the agenda that was shared as well. So I'll stop here, see if there are any questions. I see Rick's hand is up, and then John, I don't know if that's an old hand or not. So go ahead, Rick.
You okay, Dustin?
Yep, all good.
Gotcha.
So how many topics I guess it really depends if we're going to do this virtually or not. That's how we're going to figure out the number of topics and ranking. So that will obviously determine kind of where we are, right? So kind of the key is to know exactly what the format's going to be. We're going to do it over 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, all that based on cost and availability. So that's going to be sort of the driving factor for all of this as we look at their timeline. That's sort of the first thing we need to nail down. So then we know how to structure.
Yeah, we have the frame built, but we need to kind of fill in that as we actually figure out the format. Regarding your question on the number of sessions, likely, unless we decide to change things drastically, it'll be between 8 and 10. And probably, I think 2 days seemed to work well for folks. So, but we'll have all of those conversations moving forward.
Perfect. And did we get feedback from the last session of sort of what people liked and what they didn't like? Is that going to help us in the virtual versus real world?
Yeah, I'm happy to circulate the survey results that we got again. And to the extent that anyone has additional feedback, when we have conversations about the format, we'll bring that into the conversation as well. So one thing in scheduling our regular meetings is figuring out the best day of the week and the best time that avoids regularly scheduled meetings that we know can conflict. Obviously, things will come up and not everybody will be able to make every meeting, but wanted to do a quick poll to see which day of the week is preferred and which time of the day is preferred. All times are after 12 p.m. to better accommodate those that do not live on the East Coast. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll, and if you all could just pick what you would prefer here, that'll help us get closer to setting up these generally scheduled meetings.
Is there a reason not to have Friday on there?
The main issue with Friday is that we have to avoid holidays, and that'll likely result in us adjusting our regularly scheduled time several times throughout the process, rather than just having, you know, last year we had every Wednesday, not every Wednesday, but every meeting was Wednesday, 2:30 to 4. And that seemed to work well, but wanted to get a sense of the best day and time, and or probably better, what to avoid. But if you want to argue strongly for Friday.
Jeff Newman and I are both in favor of Friday, I think.
Yeah, this is Jeff. Definitely. Oop, my video's not on. Sorry, I've been having some freeze issues with the video. But yeah, I think because a lot of us are involved in many international committees, they generally avoid Fridays because Fridays or Saturdays, you know, in other places in the world. So there's almost never an international meeting on Friday. So I actually think Friday is pretty good for this. And there's not a huge number of holidays in the US, so we pretty much know when they are and can schedule around them now.
I'm getting a few pushbacks for the Friday slot as well. We can.
Is there a reason we don't like Mondays? Tell me why. Sorry.
That's a good song.
Do you want the Garfield example or the cat?
A lot of us have weekly team meetings on Fridays, so kickoff meetings.
All right. Well, apologies for not including Friday in this. Happy to, in scheduling our ongoing meetings, send out a survey to the list that includes Friday. But right now it's looking like later in the day is generally the preference. And so we'll aim for something later in the afternoon. And then once we decide on the day, we'll send around a timeline that has all of the meetings and when they'll be scheduled, so that you can generally hold that slot, assuming you don't have a regular conflict.
Yeah, I think it's later in the day during the week, but I think a Friday, I'm sure people would want to have it a little bit earlier because, you know, it's Friday.
Yeah.
I don't want to do a 3 to 5 on a Friday.
Right, right.
Do we want to run up the best one here against something on Friday quickly, or I don't want to, sorry to put you on the spot there, Dustin. What's the clear winner here?
Thursday between
Thursday
3 to 5. Yeah. Okay.
Or Friday 1 to 2. No.
Yeah, maybe that would be an interesting comparison. Thursday 3 to 5,
yeah.
Friday 1 to 2.
Yeah, if you want to kill the time with maybe some conversation about
cats.
Yeah,
networking, online networking. We can talk about who the online bartender will be this year.
Yeah, I hope people enjoyed that when we did our.
Totally.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rick. I mean, that was such a great idea, and the execution was perfect. They really had it together.
They did. I'm very proud of that company. But yeah, I enjoyed it. But then again, I'm Irish and we're drinking, so could be anything. So
I think dance lessons. We need online dance lessons.
Well, the one that would be fun would be they do a trivia. And we did that for some political events. I don't want to say which side of the aisle it was, but is the current president? No, just kidding. But
how bad did he lose?
But that's also fun. You know, again, kind of stealing from Shane Tews and her bingo. But they did trivia is also a fun thing to do, and that we could look into. Mm-hmm. If we want to make it geek trivia, but that could be fun, just like we did geek drinks. Who really founded the internet? we could do something like that. So if you guys are interested, I'm happy to sponsor that again.
I like the idea of something interactive and that we can get in groups and do some things together.
Yeah, the trivia
idea.
one, you can build teams. Like you can do teams, and they can pre-teams and everything. So if you're interested in doing that, again, I'm happy to sponsor that. With Iggy Ventures. Of course, I'm looking at all the fun stuff, not the substance stuff.
I have a question regarding how things have been working for you guys. When I can see that progression that takes place in that 6-month sort of itinerary that Dustin put out there. As you progress through the year and develop more, maybe it's sound platforms or an understanding of what the group wants to, is it that you're getting to present certain situations, certain ideas, certain developmental ideas to search engines, to lawmakers? How has it been working for you guys?
So our mission is to add to, to supplement, to spark dialogue about current topics on any part of internet governance. So at any layer of the internet, from infrastructure to social media and applications, any concepts that are currently out there and could benefit from discussion, and then be moved on from there. And the movement from our discussion could be anything from government regulation on one extreme to development of norms or standards or best practices, or other documentation and things that might happen. We often, one of the ways, the simple ways to think about it is, is there a problem that we have lots of smart people that we can get together and talk solutions. We don't intend to completely define the solution, but we want to advance the dialogue, because there is something, or maybe in the words of the sublime Amanda Gorman, right, that's just not finished. What can we do to help advance and to make some progress?
Understood. Okay, that helps a lot. Yes, because there's something specific with me that I've kind of felt out a little bit, and me joining in with a large level of ignorance can work well. Exactly, like, I don't know how any of it works, but I know I can typically navigate through things and get it done. So now I'm just trying to see where exactly this has gone in the past. And have you felt, you know what, that's probably not even, it's an entirely new world today. So let's just go.
So just to keep I would love to set up a time to talk more about this with you. But just to keep us on time here, we have a really unfortunate result here. With a pretty much a tie here. I didn't get to vote because I ran the poll, and my vote would have been for Thursday. So that actually makes it
Friday,
close.
Thursday it is then.
Oh wait, did I miss it? Did it pop up? Sorry.
Oh yeah, it's including my vote, which was I wasn't able to actually put in. It's actually right down the middle split, but.
Were there mail-in votes too? Or that,
yeah, I mean, I don't think
we're not going down that
road. Audit, look for the Chads.
Yeah, we'll get back to you in March on the final results.
No, our philosopher kings get an extra vote. So.
We'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
So we generally have an idea of our schedule and what days they'll be on, and want to shift the focus a little bit here to talk about something that was brought up previously, which is the interim or pre-events outside of the main conference. Last year we had a pre-IGF USA event hosted with the Pew Research Center that went over a bunch of their research on public sentiment around the internet that really touched on nearly all of the sessions that we had scheduled for the big conference. And so it was really a natural partnership. We've already followed up with them for this year, and Lee is excited at the prospect of doing it again and having something a few weeks before the IGF USA to highlight their research. And it sounds like they will have more relevant research coming out at the right time for this. But there's also, in that discussion, he mentioned that they'll have various other more specific studies and reports coming out that might be more specific to just one session that we're focusing on, and might come out in March rather than in June or July. And so wanted to get a sense of, and this is something that there was some support for as we went over our 2020 debrief, of having smaller one-off events that are focused on specific issues. We don't necessarily want to compete with our own conference, but if we have opportunities with groups like Pew or things like that to do maybe more informative types of events that focus on research and things like that, is that something that you all think would be a good direction for the IGF USA outside of our main conference? I see one hand up. I don't know who that is. Sorry. It says Bay Bars. And then John, I also see your hand up. John, you can go ahead.
Okay. I'll be reporting later on the funds available. We have funds to be able to do that sort of thing. We're way ahead of where we would ought to be, because normally we would have spent a lot of money on the location, on the wonderful food and everything that gets brought to that. But I think it's a great way, and it could be that it would be a way to involve groups that might have a topic that they could contribute in depth, and that could be a preparation then for that topic to being at the general IGF meeting. So I'm fully supportive of the idea of exploring that just as a continuing on further an expansion out of Washington. I mean, there are reasons why it works well in Washington, but I think it'd be great to have that out. And I think that's a way to do it.
A virtual road trip, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, if there are no other thoughts on that, we'll move on to the next item, which is a discussion on how the IGF USA can feed into the IGF 2021. And one of the opportunities that is currently open at the moment is the IGF 2021 call for thematic inputs. And in the past, we've discussed and kind of agreed on it asks for up to 3 issues that we think the IGF could prioritize in 2021. And then it also has an opportunity for suggestions about the overall format and design of the IGF. Would like to focus first on the 3 issues and also clarify that in thinking about what these 3 issues are that we should recommend that the IGF prioritize, we do have an established process within the other NRI networks with all of the other national and regional IGFs, where we take the conversations and the topics from the IGF-USA and organize sessions that take those conversations forward with other national and regional IGFs. So this process is actually different and doesn't need to be, pulled directly from our call for topics, especially since it won't be closed by the time that we need to make this submission, which would be next Friday, the 31st. And so wanted to start the conversation about what the 3 issues are that we think are really important for the IGF to have as thematic tracks at 2021. And if we can reach a consensus on that today, then that would be great. And if not, then for those that are interested in the conversation, we'll find a time next week to chat. So I'll open up the floor, and please, anyone just jump in and suggest topics that we think are ripe for a global conversation.
Well, you know that this Section 230 and things are being discussed regarding the development of that, correct? Now it's my understanding that the original intent of Section 230, and in referencing the Telecommunications Act of 1996, the original intent of 230 was to prevent the current state of affairs we have, and specifically in regards to the sexually explicit material that's highly destructive to society. It's causing all kinds of strife. I mean, you can go down the list. Mental health, suicide being the highest. I mean, you can make an argument for any single level of negative impact on society, and it can be justifiably argued that it contributes in some way, shape, or form to that. So it's my understanding that Section 230 was put in place to prevent the scenario that we have, and then the 26 words that ended up getting adopted are what we have now. It's not, for all I know, Section 230, I'm going about it with a level of ignorance, but to me, Section 230 could have been 100 pages originally. I don't know. I'm not saying that it has to go to that, but it would seem logically that this is where we are as a world. What I've heard about India is there was an attempt to put a filtering on the entire country, and they've learned quite a bit from that.
So to generalize this and avoid getting into a rabbit hole of 230, which is definitely not where we want to go with this conversation.
We've never gone down a 230. Dustin. I don't know what you're talking about.
What I would say to generalize that to the global conversation, since Section 230 is, of course, a U.S. law, what I heard you mention is, and this is just general thematic tracks that we're trying to recommend. So something related to content moderation, perhaps liability, and I heard some filtering in there as well. So let's kind of put that on the table as a potential option, and then also wanted to go to Courtney, who I saw shoot up a hand, and then after Courtney, Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think one suggestion would be content moderation throughout the stack. So looking at what it means to do it at different layers of the tech stack. And then either, part of that theme or kind of separately is kind of looking at the digital sovereignty and coordination between online platforms around content moderation and coordination and collaboration with governments.
When you say content stack, I'm a little ignorant on that. What does that
mean? Just the different layers of the tech stack. I think Dustin mentioned it earlier. So looking at the application layer, the content layer. So that's like social media platforms where you get your content and interact, but then also looking at things like content moderation at the DNS level, or web hosting, or cybersecurity, or content delivery services, payment services. So looking at content moderation throughout the technological infrastructure of the internet, and perhaps with the goal of coming to some norms around that. But right now, I think we just need to look at it as an issue, because most of the content moderation discussion tends to focus on the content or application layer.
Thank you.
That's a good point. And it's not just the focus, but there's also then just a gaping hole and just a level of ignorance about it. So shining some light there and education would be good.
Mike, go ahead.
Well, I'm the emerging technology guy, and one thing that IGF Global has done less and less effectively is look over the horizon. I mean, partly because we have so many problems right here and now, but I hope we can push them to look at new models and new technologies. So rather than calling it emerging technologies, maybe something like new tools, new models. And then to be more specific about two things that I think we could really do a lot to push is trust and identity. I mean, a lot of the problems we talk about with robots, bots amplifying hate speech and all this disinformation is because we don't have a way to ascertain what's real and what's not. My favorite website right now is Botometer. You can type in a Twitter handle and you can find out how likely that handle is associated with some kind of disinformation campaign, whether it's a robot or a troll working from Russia. So as I say, trust and identity. And then the last thing would be new models of collaboration. And one thing that I think is really exciting is the discussion around data unions or data trusts. And this is a way that we could have third parties who collect data for us. So it would be data about us, in some cases data we produce. And rather than going into the giant data lake that Facebook or Google runs, we would actually have these data unions that would be like credit unions, and they would be beholden to us. And this would allow all sorts of interesting collaboration, because you could imagine these different data unions ending up with data from tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of people that they could anonymize, but they could also protect it. They would be committed to protecting the personal data and the privacy of the people making data available, but that data could be anonymized and used for all sorts of very exciting new initiatives, from machine learning to new types of monitoring for epidemics, for political movements. I mean, there's just a whole world of things that can happen if we move in this direction. And again, it's not something that we hear a lot about. And I agree with Anne. Love the data union idea. If you want, I'll put an article up from Sandy Pentland that explains what this is all about and why it's so important.
So I like what you said about emerging technologies and trying to look in the future rather than the here and now. But I'm wondering if we should, to your point about setting guidance and being more helpful, if we would be better defining and say emerging technologies in like maybe 3 specific areas, that there are 3 specific problems that we think are where they are.
I sort of outlined that. So there are new technologies for identity. There's new technologies like data trust for data protection. And then I would argue we could say new technologies for connecting the unconnected. And that could be low Earth orbiting satellites, that could be mesh networks and the things that the Internet Society is doing. A lot of that, some of that's been explored in the past, but it's happening now. And that's what's different this year, is we're actually seeing these things deployed.
Yeah, we're seeing limitations and the need for higher bandwidth, for example. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Oh, it won't be
I understand now. I thought you were giving those as 3 separate ones. I didn't understand that the emerging technologies was the umbrella.
Well, yeah,
like
that's my general complaint is that they don't look forward enough, and I would hesitate and say don't use emerging technologies. Let's use futures or new models. Somehow that.
So let's keep moving down the line and try to synthesize this if we can. Jeff, Rick, then Judith.
Yeah, hi, it's Jeff Newman. I've been having a lot of conversations lately on online platform moderation, and I think it goes hand in hand with the content moderation concept. I'd rather actually not call it content moderation, but maybe something more like content accountability, because when people think of content moderation, they generally think only of free speech rights, censorship, things like that. But the real larger topic is who to hold accountable for content that we as a society, as a culture, find offensive, misleading, criminal, things like that. That's really where the discussions are happening. So whether it comes to things like, sex trafficking, which is covered by SESTA FOSTA or FOSTA SESTA, the very different issue than censorship and taking or picking and choosing other types of content to take off the internet. So I think I don't really like the name content moderation, because I think it only covers one of the entire topic. And I think some of the issues that we tend to have ignored in past years is that there really is a feeling in society, as was said before, that some content should not be out there. And we need to kind of respect that part of society and figure out how we can deal with content that society deems undesirable. Thanks.
And then what you're saying regarding accountability, if you have a more quality level of accountability that's perhaps even more publicized or well-known, somebody knows I'm putting this on there on the internet, I'm going to be rung up this flagpole, or everybody look at me, is going to happen. And there's a certain level of accountability having to do with that. So it's a deterrent in and of itself. Right.
Go ahead, Rick.
I was going to say something similar to what Jeff was just saying, which is focusing, when you get into content moderation and content, it's very difficult with First Amendment issues here in the States, different in other countries, as we know. But the conduct issue is sort of where, if we're going to focus on 230, talk about content moderation, but I also think of responsibility and conduct of the platforms, and what are they doing and not doing in terms of their own internal mechanisms. When, again, at MySpace, we took a very hard line in terms of not rolling out features that we could not figure out how to protect our users. We didn't have to, we had 230 protections, but we did because it was the right thing to do. Others went in different directions. So the conduct issue has to be part of the 230 debate, the duty of care that most companies have to follow. So I think if we're going to have a 230 discussion, I think it's important to add that element into it, because it gets away from the First Amendment issues that are hard to deal with in the States, but also has some ramifications. So something, transparency as well, has to be part of that. Even our folks at Facebook and others have said transparency changes to 230 that go around transparency are important. So I think we just need to add those words. But the other issue that I think is macro, and maybe because I'm just too much involved with the intellectual property constituency at ICANN and the business constituency, and the growing concerns, as you guys have all heard me talk about who is and others who are controlling the ICANN process, we should talk about internet governance. Who really is controlling the root? Where is it happening? I think that issue is, NTIA finally put out a letter after a lot of years of work, heard about it several years ago, about who is, and other issues around ICANN and other companies. And I think we should have a discussion, a re-examination of the multi-stakeholder model within ICANN and where it's gone. To me, it's drifted further away from when those of us who worked hard in Congress in the early days to get it up and running and protect it. And I think the Internet Governance Forum should begin and have a discussion about where we were, where we are today, and who actually controls the multi-stakeholder process within the Internet governance around ICANN and other multi-stakeholder entities like ISOC.
Thanks, Rick. Judith, and then Fiona.
Yeah, hi, Judith. So I like I like the ideas of the content moderation as well, but I'm going to propose two ideas. Of course, I want some issue of data, of digital inclusion or connectivity, those issues, because I'm just as you know, I'm very passionate about those. But I'm also thinking about data governance issues, and that's a wider frame where it looks also not only of governance of data, of who owns data, but also looks at the artificial intelligence algorithms and looking at what kind of data is put into these things and how they're misused, and how someone who's scraping data where they was put on for one purpose is actually scraped and turned on for totally different purposes, and some more of the governance issues, and not necessarily about you from looking at it also from a user's perspective, but also of overarching overall theme on data governance, on whether data can be put out and misused for another idea that wasn't at all in the thought of the person who originally posted the data. So some kind of way to help put some rights into that. I don't know if I'm stating this clearly, but I listened to the very beginning of the talk that ISOC had sponsored with GW, and there was a great speaker who talked about a lot of issues that I think are important.
Thanks, Judith. Fiona?
Can I get in the queue, Dustin?
Yeah, sorry, who is that?
Steve.
Oh, Steve, yes. So Fiona, then Steve.
Yeah, I was just gonna suggest, instead of having another sort of ongoing Section 230 rabbit hole conversation, it might be interesting to actually look at the bigger picture, because there's the issue of the platforms and where they fit into the disinformation radicalization issue, but also just broadly the information ecosystem, right? So not just the platforms, but maybe what's the impact of media and radio and TV and that as well. That might be more interesting, and sort of maybe try to delineate, instead of looking at content moderation down the internet stack, up and down the domain name system and other layers, which I think this group has done a couple of times in different ways, maybe expanding beyond sort of to the disinformation portfolio. And because I can't help myself, I would refrain from acting on a letter sent from NTIA in the waning days of the Trump administration, and actually wait and see what the Biden information to the user going to be. So.
Thanks, Fiona. Steve,
Yeah,
go
but
ahead.
you also had on, it wasn't just it was also the language in the COVID-19.
Sorry, debate for another
Right,
time.
but let's, especially now because this is Albianco on the phone. We are trying to focus on topics that the full global IGF would find relevant. So in that respect, things like First Amendment and Section 230 actually don't apply, and we'd have to find another way to get there. Maybe content moderation, responsibility, and accountability is a generalized enough topic. But I believe the one topic is picking up a year later on something we covered in IGF-USA, and that would be the role, both positive and negative, the role of the internet at coping with and recovering from the global pandemic. The role of the internet in coping and recovering from the global pandemic. I'm being optimistic that by the July dates, we're somewhere in the recovery stage, but that provides a rich experience that would be relevant to everyone on the planet and would allow us to talk about things like disinformation, talk about the ability to use the internet to stay connected with friends and family, to be productive at work and educational. So it's a general theme that I'll bet the MAG would end up embracing. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And I saw Courtney's hand go up again as well.
Yeah, just to totally plus one what Steve said, I think that just as a general thematic topic, COVID-19 and its, I mean, both its role in recovering, but also repercussions, because of course there's the negative side of, you know, surveillance and data and how that's, you know, transformation in the healthcare sector, both pros and cons. So I think that's a great idea. And then just in terms of another kind of global issue, taxation, and I don't have it well formulated, but you know, we're all watching what's happening in Australia and France. Going to Fiona's point about the media ecosystem and broader information ecosystem, I think that would be really interesting. We're seeing social media laws and taxation in parts of Africa. And yeah, I think that's an emerging issue, so I put that out there.
So I like that. It's very specific. And the reason I'm saying that is there was another train here in the chat about commerce in general and Bitcoin and currencies. I wonder if the broader topic might be something, you know, economics or commerce, of which taxation and currency would be examples. What do we think about that?
Perfect.
So maybe if I might try to synthesize this in kind of capturing some of the more specific stuff and putting it in larger packages. There's the discussion around content. I thought that both Courtney, Jessica, and Steve had a good suggestions that maybe this can be about the broader information ecosystem, and the content shaping moderation and accountability was what Jessica used, and I think Steve maybe said content creation, moderation, and accountability, but something along those lines would be one bucket. And then
don't forget conduct, which goes with accountability.
Yeah. And then in thinking, you know, several people mentioned connectivity and inclusion, and I think a lot of the other things would feed into the role that the internet has played in response and recovery to COVID-19. And then the larger discussion around the digital markets, whether we're talking about taxation, would welcome any better language on how we submit that. And then we can make a footnote, because I think one thing that you could look at Mike's early suggestion either as an umbrella or a thread that flows through all of these. And so just make a note highlighting that focusing on emerging technologies within each of these thematic areas should be a priority as well. Does that seem like a reasonable synthesis of the conversation so far?
I've thrown an example. We can feel free to use the chat to workshop some of these here.
Just to draw attention to a comment earlier, what about one kind of overarching theme, which is power? Because that can also, I think, relate to a lot of these different more specific issues, but kind of where does power, the ability to exert power, the right to exert power exist in these different issues, whether we're talking about, data or moderation or taxation or any of these things. So that's kind of like, and even in, discussions around kind of usability rights and that sort of thing. So maybe that could be one overarching theme.
perhaps also like I mentioned with Mike's, also like a thread that could flow throughout all of it as well. Are there any other thoughts on this before we kind of take the notes from the discussion and try to synthesize it and send it around to the list on Monday, and then giving a few days for feedback before the deadline on the 31st? Jessica, I see in the video you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the little hand thing. Sorry. Just switching from platform to platform all day long, so I haven't memorized all the settings everywhere. Yeah, I just put a comment in the chat. I feel like one thing that is kind of missing is some kind of focus on ads and target advertising and those kinds of issues, and I'm wondering if they could fit in the digital markets theme of. And so I just wanted to be explicit about that. I wrote it in the chat, but I really think that that's something that's on deck.
Great.
Jessica, I agree with that. I think there's a whole change coming in terms of digital advertising. IAB actually did a great report past year on the changes that for brands and everybody else, and obviously the rhetoric coming out on with the brands advertising around certain things. I think that's a great topic.
So we'll try to work that in as well, and we'll send a proposal that tries to take all of this and work it into 3 themes, and look forward to your feedback. So with that, why don't we turn it over to John for just a kind of financial update. Normally we would have a draft budget in place by now, but again, with the uncertainty around the format, hard to do so. So John, go ahead.
So this is John Moore, and I think at the end of 2019, we had 12,000 left from the year before. This year, putting that together with what we raised and what we spent, we have over 29,000 waiting. There may be maybe $100 or $200 that I need to allocate. These are where we have shared things that that the chapter uses, such as SurveyMonkey or something that, but it's a minor amount. And we also, I don't know, there've been some miscues on raising. There should be another 10,000 that should be coming in, and I've seemed to have been back and forth with the finance departments on the forums and stuff, but I'm pretty sure that we will have that amount of money. So we're in excellent financial shape, and obviously, depending on what we put forth, that will be significant for further fundraising, and it's why I do believe that this idea of expanding and making use of it, particularly if we do not look like we're going to have a large in-person event, but we need to keep that reserve. So, and I think as Dustin said, there's no purpose of having a budget per se, but my feeling is that we are in excellent financial shape. So that's where we are. So as I said, at the moment, we have in the bank over $29,000 with no commitments at the moment for additional, for use of it. And if anyone has any questions, happy to answer them. Yeah. Oh. Yep, I don't see any. It's nice to be able to say something like that.
Yeah, and just for everyone on here who works for or has been a part of fundraising, thank you for your work. Thank you for your contributions.
And one thing I would add is that the sponsorships come with people. It's not just money. It's with commitment to the IGF-USA. So it's really a symbol of the fact that we have, I think, done a successful job. And I personally felt that last year's was really great on short notice to come up with as strong a IGF USA as we did.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was one of the best ones. And also I think it's a model. I see so many of the other meetings happening, and even them doing webinars, it did not have as much inclusivity as the IGF USA did. Many of them close the chat or don't let you see the questions. And we tried to do a happy medium of like having open chat so people could have a conversation and also see what questions are out, and gives them more ideas of what else to ask, what's been asked, and spurring thing is. And if we do, you know, maybe we might look for doing more of a different type of meeting format. But I like the idea of how we try to make the webinar as interactive as possible and get more people involved, because that really brings other people into the table.
One of the designs I thought was effective, and Mike Nelson is very good at doing this, is when we had the panels with all of the faces there when questions came up, and it was very easy for Mike to point to one of the panel members and sometimes you could see a quizzical look or a wow, and whereas up on the podium, people are a lot farther away. So.
Yeah. So thanks, John, for the update and for the comments here. I think that's a good segue into the reminder that, you know, we're going to be sending out the call for topics. And as you do that, as you submit topics, as you encourage other people to submit topics, let's go with the same approach and remember the successes from 2020 that, you know, we maximized the virtual event by getting people without any constraint of travel, that we could get subject matter experts, that we could get people leading in their field. So as you're submitting topics, think not just, oh, this interested me, I read something a couple times, so this might be in the zeitgeist. Think about the people that we want to be hearing about. Think about the people who are publishing on this, or leading in research, that we want to have involved. You know, try to consider all of those as we're doing topics and be as specific as possible. I don't want to see, you know, let's talk security. Okay, let's be a little more specific. You know, let's say, can we help Joe Biden get on his Peloton safely in the White House, right? That's the kind of specificity that I want to see as you're submitting these topics. And I hope that they haven't worked out by then.
Well, I think that brings us to a slightly early close here. There are no other items that anyone would like to interject. Then we can close it up. And just a reminder, please do help promote that call for topics. Your input's important, but so is everyone else's, so please help us spread the word.